So you may have realized that our presentation began at the door of merit, where we separated you, classified you, and then seated you based on racial categories. The first thing that I would like to ask is how it felt to be separated, classified, and seated in this manner. And I would like 3 people from each section to share with the group what that experience was like.
I thought it was fascinating that I had to say what percentage of whatever white group I was.
Okay. In the middle? Uncomfortable. Yes.
I thought it was interesting because I handled that and the origin asked like where I was from or where my heritage was.
Yes?
I was kind of forced to be separated from a friend from another group.
Forced to be separated from a friend. Okay, uncomfortable evokes the yellow star of World War II. Yes, ma'am.
I was curious or
Curious and nervous. Let me get one more from this section.
my question was where's the line?
Where's the line?
Where was the line drawn through Europe?
Where was the line drawn through Europe? Let me get one more person from the clearly white section and one person from the clearly not white section, please.
It felt normal.
It felt normal.
Yeah, it felt comfortable.
It felt really odd.
It felt really odd. Normal and really odd. Okay. So this is actually a variation of an activity that I do with my Black psychology class. And, excuse me, the purpose is to introduce the group to the history of racial classification in the United States. And the goal is to have them understand that the classification system is concerned with who is and who is not white, primarily. That the classification system is fundamentally dynamic, it's contradictory, and oftentimes very arbitrary to the whims of the census takers. In this instance, the census takers were Diara and myself. So you were who we said you were. Another point is to illustrate to the students the consistent anti-Black anchor of this particular racial classification system. So another question that I have for the group is, what does it mean to be colorblind?
To be ignorant of social and economic and historical context.
To be ignorant of social and economic and historical context, okay? Yes. Acting. Okay, acting with disregard, okay. Any other definition? So typically when people are asked what it means to be colorblind, they talk about it as not seeing race or as seeing beyond race to the content of people's character. Both of those sound like excellent definitions, so what's the problem? The problem is we don't do it.
We ignore the systems that are in place, basically, that reinforce the classifications.
Yeah, we ignore the systems that are in place that reinforce the classification system. To be colorblind and for it to work requires a belief in a just world. And in psychology, we call this a just world bias. And that is the bias, our desire to believe that life is fair, The just world bias acts as a psychological defense. It helps to protect us. It gives us a sense of security and safety in the midst of other people's misery and misfortune. We can believe that people get what they deserve and people deserve what they get. Okay? So how might colorblindness and just world bias work together to reinforce a system of racial supremacy? Yes.
It lets those in power ignore what's going on around them by saying, well, if they're in, this person in poverty is because they deserve it, they don't want to versus, more into poverty.
Yes, yes, yes. If the person is in poverty, it's because they didn't work hard enough. It allows people in power to ignore the differentials. Okay, so speaking of privilege, when we talk about privilege, we're talking about an unearned advantage. And so thinking about racial privilege, you're talking about an unearned advantage based on your skin pigmentation. So if you will indulge me in another activity, I'm going to read a series of statements to you. Yes. And if the statement is true, you're going to sit down. If the statement is not true, you're going to remain standing. So I'm first going to ask everyone to stand. Yes, I get to stand. Okay, so everyone is standing. I'm going to read a statement. If the statement is true for you, you are going to sit down. If the statement is not true for you, you are going to remain standing. Okay? Students in my high school looked mostly like me. Most of my teachers looked like people of my race. Film and television stories about people from my racial group are mostly told by people from my racial group. I'm pretty sure that if I go to a business and I ask to speak to the person in charge, I will be speaking to someone of my race. Let me say the directions again. If the statement is true for you, sit down. So if it is true that if you go to a business and ask to speak to the person in charge, you'll speak to someone of your race, you should sit down. I can go anywhere in the country and can easily find the kinds of hair products I want and/or cosmetics that will match the color of my skin. Okay. So for individuals who were able to sit down right away, how did that feel? Yes. Unsurprising. Okay. That's okay. What was it like, those who got to sit down right away or relatively early on, what was it like to sit down and continue to stand? I'm sorry, what was it like to watch people continue to stand while you were allowed to sit down? Mm-hmm. I did not like it. Like to live in a just world. Mm-hmm. What was it like to have to sit down but then maybe want to get back up because something else that I read did not apply to you? Was that true for anyone? Mm-hmm. What was that like?
I felt good about it because
Okay. And what was it like to have to stand the whole time?
Like every day.
It was like every day. Okay.
But it made me, in this instance, really feel what it, feel like you're standing out.
In psychology, we often call that spotlight anxiety, when you feel that you are the center of attention and all eyes are on you, that can be an anxiety-provoking experience. So this is a variation of the walk of privilege many of you have probably heard of or done with student groups created by Peggy McIntosh. And the purpose is to facilitate mindfulness of the connection between racial representation in our society and feelings of comfort, that you physically got to sit down and relax, physically at least, although it did not feel good to one person, and also racial invisibility and discomfort, that the group that is clearly not white had to actually physically stand the entire time, which is akin to the exhaustion that a lot of people of color say they experience with racial battle fatigue. Okay, so please have a seat and relax. Okay. I'm going to give you a profanity warning. There's profanity in this clip that I'm about to show you. I teach a seminar in psychology of white racism, and a student of color in that seminar recently said on her trip abroad, while studying abroad, that she was one of only a handful of people of color, and that she was given special privilege and treated very well, actually, because she was treated as a quote-unquote American. And she reported to the group that being white is awesome. That being white is awesome, which is a sentiment that's echoed by comedian Louis C.K. I'm going to share this with you, and the transcript of this is in your seat.
Sorry I'm being so negative. I'm a bummer. I don't know. I shouldn't be. I'm a very, lucky guy. I got a lot going for me. I'm healthy. I'm relatively young. I'm white, which thank God for that shit, boy. That is a huge leg up. Are you kidding me? Oh, God, I love being white. I really do. Seriously, if you're not white, you're missing out, because this shit is thoroughly good. But let me be clear, by the way. I'm not saying that white people are better. I'm saying that being white is clearly better. Who could even argue? If it was an option, I would re-up every year. Oh, yeah, I'll take white again. Absolutely. I've been enjoying that. I'm going to stick with white. Thank you. Here's how great it is to be white. I could get in a time machine and go to any time, and it would be fucking awesome when I get there. That is exclusively a white privilege. Black people can't fuck with time machines. A black guy in a time machine is like, hey, anything before 1980? No, thank you, I don't want to go. But I can go to any time. The year 2, I don't even know what's happening then. But I know when I get there, welcome, we have a table right here for you, sir. Oh, thank you. Oh, it's lovely here in the year 2. I can go to any time. In the past, I don't want to go to the future and find out what happens to white people, because we're going to pay hard for this shit. You got to know that. We're not going to just fall from number 1 to 2. They're going to... And we totally deserve it. But for now, whee! Now, if you're white and you don't admit that it's great, you're an asshole. It is great, and I'm a man. How many advantages could one person have? I'm a white man. You can't even hurt my feelings. What can you really call a white man that really digs deep? Hey, cracker. Oh, ruined my day. Boy, shouldn't have called me a cracker. Bringing me back to owning land and people. What a drag.
So, but the truth is, actually, being white is not totally awesome. Because here's the issue, that the research shows that Our avoidance of race and discussions of race and racism and our desire to believe in a just world, it comes with a cost that oftentimes individuals who are classified as white, who are asked to talk about race and racism, report feeling a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, a lot of racial anxiety, fear of racial others, irrational thoughts regarding racial others, very obviously disconnection from a whole chunk of the greater humanity, and also a very fragile self-concept. So in many ways, it is awesome, and in some ways it's not. And Toni Morrison tells us that white racism it feels crazy, and it is crazy. So I'm gonna show you what she has to say about that.
Yes, I do, Charlie, but let me tell you, that's the wrong question.
Okay, what's the right question?
How do you feel? Not you, Charlie Rose,
Right.
but don't you understand that the people who do this thing, who practice racism,
Right.
are bereft? There is something distorted about the psyche. It's a huge waste, and it's a corruption and a distortion. It's a profound neurosis that nobody examines for what it is. It feels crazy. It is crazy. And it has just as much of a deleterious effect on white people, and possibly equal as it does black people. I always knew that I had the moral high ground all my life. I always thought those people who said I couldn't come in the drugstore and I had to sit in these funny places, I couldn't go in the park.
You felt morally superior to them
I
from
did.
day one.
And I thought they knew that I knew that they were inferior to me morally. I always thought that. And my parents always thought that.
You said your father was racist because he always felt like he was superior.
That's right. He always felt superior. And that was a form, of defensive racism. But if the racist white person, I don't mean the person who is examining his consciousness and so on, doesn't understand that he or she is also a race, it's also constructed, it's also made, and it also has some kind of serviceability. But when you take it away, I take your race away, and there you are, all strung out, and all you got is your little self. And what is that? What are you without racism? Are you any good? Are you still strong? You still smart? You still like yourself? I mean, these are the questions. Part of it is, yes, the victim, how terrible it has been for black people.
You don't like that.
I'm not a victim. I refuse to be one.
And the victim is the other person who is morally inferior and
That's
who
a
has
serious
to hold
question.
on to
Of course.
racism
If you
to
have to
somehow
hold, that's
for
right.
his or her own self-esteem and definition.
If you can only be tall because somebody's on their knees, then you have a serious problem. And my feeling is white people have a very, very serious problem. And they should start thinking about what they can do about it. Take me out of it.
Then give white people some free advice.
They're all in my books.
And the advice is,
So the good news is that recovery is possible. But really, this interrogation of whiteness is what I have students do in the Psychology of White Racism seminar. I have them interrogate its origins, its constructions, its reconstructions, the arbitrary nature of it, the connections with religion, with gender, with class, its consequences. I ask them to seek an answer to the question of how your family became white. A very large portion of our group here was actually placed in the not quite white group. And that is because at some point in time, historically, your ancestors were not considered white. And so I asked students to think about the process of becoming white. What racial contracts were signed? What did your family relinquish as part of the deal? And that is what I asked them to grapple with in that seminar. I believe that when students do this in earnest, and I've seen it, that transformation does result. And here is just an excerpt from one student who has been through that class and what she had to say. We'll call her Dawn. This class has inspired me to relate differently in my relationship with my sister. First, it has made me able to understand and accept that my sister is different than I am. She is not white in America. She will not always experience the same things that I do. She will not always be seen in the same light that I am. And she may not even receive the same opportunities. At times, she makes remarks about unfair treatment, looks she gets in the store, and comments that her friends make that tie in not only to her skin color, but to the language people assume she speaks, the personality they think she has, and her religious background. Before, when she brought this type of thing up, I would usually laugh or roll my eyes and say that she was being silly. I didn't like to think that other people saw her as any different than they were, that they singled her out. After going home to Vermont, one of the whitest states in the Union, I began to really look around. People did indeed stare at us. When we were in line together, people automatically looked to me as the leader, rather than attempting to speak to her. When they did, it was with a voice that was a little louder than when they spoke to me. Now, instead of brushing it off when she says something, I can listen and understand what she's saying, and I can begin to empathize with how she must feel not being white in America. That concludes my portion.